Welcome and thank you for all who were able to join us to this special live broadcast on creating a compelling resume. My name is Heather Mann and I will be moderating this event. This presentation is part of our ongoing digital learning program sponsored by the Office of Alumni and Constituent Engagement. As our world is becoming increasingly digital, we are focusing efforts on bringing lifelong learning to a variety of digital platforms to meet the needs of our alumni, students, parents, leaders, donors, and friends. Two quick pieces of housekeeping to note. This presentation is being recorded and will be sent later today, so to everyone who registered. And please, secondly, type your questions in the questions section of the platform, and we will be able to get to as many of those questions as possible during the presentation. Today, we are incredibly grateful to be joined by Cydnee Dubrof. With over 2 decades of executive search experience, Cydnee serves as a trusted advisor to global foundations, nonprofits, and corporations seeking to engage leaders who will reimagine their operating models and raise the performance bar. She's an expert in leading complex searches for C-suite executives and their direct reports, as well as founder transitions. She founded the Dubrof Group to provide custom executive search services to clients who are seeking exceptional leadership. She also advises mid-career and senior executives on career transitions. Thanks again, Cydnee, and take it away.
Thank you, Heather. I appreciate it. And welcome. It's nice to kind of see you, not see you. I wish I could. And I really want to emphasize and reiterate the invitation to ask questions. I wish this could be even more iterative, and I'm here to shape this to what you need. And there are a couple of questions that we got in advance, and I'll address those later on in the presentation. But you can see from here, all above the line is what has shaped me, and below the line are some organizations where I've had the opportunity to help shape them, and very lucky to do so. And the reason why Heather asked me to help you is I also work with mid-career executives to transition, have a wonderful 6 to 8 week boot camp where we get the resume done, the LinkedIn, the career narrative, etc. So you're getting a slice of that today. What we're going to cover today is the purpose of a resume, the 3 steps that I think are really helpful in crafting one that can be compelling. We'll discuss some of the format and design options and how a resume fits in with the branding of you. And then I'll share some trends that we've been seeing. So probably you guys know this. The resume is going to sell you and make you attractive and intrigue the employer. It's going to demonstrate your strengths and what value you bring to that said employer. Now there's a word on this screen that you're seeing twice, once highlighted in yellow, once down here on the bottom. So results, results, results. It is tremendously important that you demonstrate the results that you've accomplished to date, because that's the best prediction of what you'll be able to do in the future. Obviously, this resume is going to reveal your writing skills. And Heather and I were just discussing, while it's perfectly okay to get some advice and help on how to craft your resume, please, please, please always be able to tweak it yourself. There's nothing more frustrating when I'm talking to a candidate and I say, okay, can you change the date, or there's a typo here, and he or she says, well, I've got to ask my resume writer to do that. Unless you're 70, you should really know how to write your own resume. Finally, this piece of paper or 2 or 3 will show your fit to the actual role. And you can be creative. For example, let me show you this. This woman has some really valuable creative skills. Now, you're not going to necessarily scream on your resume, but feel free to express yourself with the primal scream when you get frustrated during the process. And sometimes you can get frustrated, it's okay. And don't scream during an interview, for advice. So before you get started with actually putting data on the sheet of paper, think about yourself. Conduct a self-assessment, maybe even ask people to weigh in on how they view your strengths, your capabilities, how are you different from anyone else at your age and stage, and what's the value you bring to a potential employer. You may gain some insights as you're doing your informational interviews, which of course are now all virtual, when you're hearing, oh my gosh, I keep hearing that data is so important, data, data, data. People are emphasizing that. So that's a clue for you to put it in your resume. Look at job postings, network. Look at profiles on LinkedIn of people who have positions that you want and see what you see in their background. And use those keywords that you see in their profiles or postings as you're crafting your own resume. It's not going to be easy. As my good friend Steven Spielberg says, a dream will test your resolve. Maybe even he could say a dream could be a nightmare. It's hard sometimes, and even more so now because we're in this particularly crazy environment, to get that dream job. And the better you figure out where your dream is, more likely you'll be able to find it. So once you figure out what your strengths and skills are, you're going to have to start quantizing them on your resume. And you want to look back at what you've done. And you want to put your results and your deliverables. And I've got a couple of real live examples from resumes that I pulled for us to critique and review together. For example, this manager of volunteer recruitment, she recruited over 500 volunteers, which was the largest in Walk for Hunger's history, through social media. So I like the fact that she's got 500 volunteers here. That's good. Largest in the history of the organization. Well, how much more powerful would it be if it were a 25-year history or 2-year history? If you could put a little framework around that, I think it would add more punch. And she didn't put this at all. If she could say, and 2 of these volunteers eventually became board members or 5-level, big time contributors, talk a little bit about more what those volunteers did. Okay, so let's look at another one. This person worked for a hospital, and he oversaw contracts for managed care agreements, and he saved, actually he got $400,000 more to the company's bottom line. So that's pretty darn good. Only thing I would add to this one is how many managed care agreements? Was it 500? Was it 4? Again, quantify. And it doesn't necessarily mean that you have done this. You could be managing a team that did this as well. So what you want to think about is, what was the challenge that you faced? Earlier in my career, I was a tax accountant. So I processed 40 corporate returns annually and investigated 60 legal challenges, saving my clients $60 million. I have a feeling that's probably not true, but that's, I'll remember it with fondness. So you talk about the actions that you took, and then what were the results. I did the returns, I did the reviews, I saved the money. And who cares? My clients definitely cared. So you always quantify, quantify, quantify. Now, 20 years later, 25 years later, I'm an executive recruiter. I am no longer a tax accountant. So I'm not going to put a lot of ink to paper in that area of my life because I'm no longer qualified nor interested in doing that. So we had an interesting question from someone who's graduating this year, who studied neuroscience and wants to be a writer. The passion was writing. So the way my wheels start turning is there's a lot of research being done now in neuroscience. And I don't know if the writing you're passionate about could be funneled into research. Could you go work for a consulting firm? You may want to look at an organization called Neuro Leadership Institute, which consults with companies and trains individuals to coach using neuroscience. So that is my tip for that particular question. Please do add some more questions in. At the top of your resume, you're going to have the marquee. Recent grads, not so much, but definitely people who have 10 years more experience. Recent grads may, because you guys have internships and other experience. It doesn't necessarily have to be paid experience, but it's a way to introduce you to the employer. It's going to grab the reader's attention. You know, with your relevant role, it's a way where it's going to be not just bullets, but it's actually more narrative form. Oftentimes you'll say 25 years experience of executive coaching and search, both nonprofit and for-profit clients, built a single person consulting firm. That was a little bit about me just on top of my head. So I'm curious to know, and Heather, maybe you could put up the poll. I have to put an organizer's closed poll, enable screen sharing.
Getting answers in right now.
Okay, so you're doing it. All right. So
Yeah.
how many of you guys are using, I can't see it on my end, an executive?
Yeah, it looks about 60-40, 60 no, 40% yes.
Okay. I'm wondering if the 60 have an objective instead of that. Because if you think about it, the executive summary, just by the way it describes you, pretty much is what we used to have as the objective at the top of the screen. So I would invite the 60 of you who aren't doing it to consider putting one up. It also helps because if you have that marquee up there, the rest of the resume should follow it. And it will be an iterative process. You'll be working on the body and then tweaking the summary to make sure that the two are in concert. Which reminds me of another question that was put in earlier. Should your LinkedIn reflect your resume? Absolutely, absolutely. Now, the cool thing about LinkedIn is you can put the logo of your employer. It can be a little bit more pizzazzy. You also, of course, with LinkedIn, you could have referrals and references. That's really neat. But your resume and your LinkedIn should be reflective of one another. In your executive summary, just to repeat, what are your outstanding characteristics, your strengths? Are you a published author? Are you a noted public speaker? Are you an award-winning manager? Those kinds of things can go up there. And of course, technical skills also would be listed. And remember, that's going to craft what you want to be getting. There's a couple of executive summaries for us to review. And the first word in this one immediately does the red lights, the warning lights. So, young leader with 15 years of proven experience. I would not use the word young. I would not use the word old. I would use energetic. I would use ambitious. I would use driven. Young is a danger word. It's qualitative. Europeans do put their date of birth and their marital status on their resumes. We don't. So I would strike that. Look at later on in the sentence, proven excellence in developing and leading digital transformation in the tourism industry. Well, tourism has been kicked in the teeth. And if this person could possibly pivot to another industry that enables him a wider opportunity of employment. So I may strike tourism altogether and just say leading digital transformation through strategic planning and long-term partnerships. Excels in turning around organizational performance. Here's where you would put in, improved revenue by 15%. Other than 15 years, there's no quantitative, excuse me. Adept at mentoring and leading high-performing executive teams. How could you be a young leader leading executive teams? And in collaborating and problem solving for a cross-functional, multicultural environment. That's okay. I just want a little bit more quantification to round it out. This person Also puts the years of experience, puts innovative leader, which I like. Scaling businesses. How big? Again, cross-functional strategies. Cross-functional, by the way, is a big buzzword, and people like to know that you can work across units. Expand at EBITDA and increase shareholder value. Perfect opportunity for putting the value of that. And then here, when he's talking about finance, strategy, innovation, and operations, the different areas in which she's working. Skilled at pulling the levers could be confusing, not exactly sure I know what that means. Problem solver, proven track record. Here we've got a little bit of numbers, early stage to billion-dollar companies and multiple sectors, that's good. Specialties or key competencies, I would not put them in caps, it's like you're yelling. And this actually goes to a question we just received. Should you put core competencies or key skills? Absolutely. You know, you want to see how much real estate you have, and if you need to fluff it up, and those keywords could come in handy with these SEOs, search engine optimization, that some of the mechanical resume readers are using. So yes, I think it's a good idea. Just make sure you're not repeating every single word that you put up in the original executive summary. Let's talk a little bit about design. There are two main formats of resumes that I see. One is chronological, reverse chronological order, and the other is functional. We recruiters do not like functional. Functional means to us, maybe you're trying to hide something. If it's chronological, we can see, okay, he graduated in 20, then he did this, then he did that. We can see if there's any gaps. When it's functional, it's hard for us. Don't make anything hard for us. We need it as easy as possible. Feel for us. So reverse chronological order is definitely preferred. Use font 10 to 12. I wouldn't go any larger than 12. I prefer a sans serif font, means it doesn't have little extra squigglies on it. It's cleaner. Rule of thumb is 1 page for every 10 years of experience. And if you have more than that, more than 15, consider summarizing an earlier role or earlier roles. You don't need to put a lot of meat behind those, especially if you're not doing that work anymore. Put your page number and name in the footer and or header, whichever works better for your resume, except for the first page. Don't put it in the first page. As we discussed earlier, you don't need an objective. Your executive summary works like that, works as that. Be judicious in your bolding and your capitalization. Sometimes people will bold words in the middle of a paragraph of text, and it's actually more distracting than it's highlighting. Don't put references upon request at the end. That, to me, means it's like the equivalent of I breathe oxygen. No, we can get your references. So I'm curious to know, is our second poll, how many of you use color currently in your resume?
Getting the answers in.
Awesome.
Right, it looks like 80% no, 20% yes.
So Heather and I were discussing this before. I see it particularly with individuals who are in a creative, artistic, graphical design field. And I think it is absolutely appropriate for them. I do think that executives could use a little color. I wouldn't make it distracting. I wouldn't use an odd color. It does become more subjective, so you could get in trouble with it. But I think especially as more people are going strictly to digital and are not printing it out, and so forth, they're not using all your inkjet ink, it's okay. But I wouldn't, I'd be very judicious. I'd use it as an accent, and I wouldn't do any more than black and the one color. So the trends that we're seeing, obviously social networking for informal recruiting, and you know that recruiters will go and check you out on social networks, so be sure you're who you want to be out on the internet. And with politics being what they are now, you absolutely can be as political as you want. Just know that it may or may not constrict your opportunities. So if I'm a liberal person and I put my liberal views out there, I know that conservative organizations probably are going to choose to work with me. It's okay. So more graphics. You remember that first slide when I had all my logos and things? I've seen resumes that have the logos, as long as it is consistent and not distracting, absolutely can use it. Your video profile and speeches, obviously you're not putting those in your resume. You can put a link to them, but people, because we're such a plugged in world now, people are looking to see how you speak in person. I guess after Heather, after you got this on record, they'll be able to find me. The SEOs, the keywords are being used, especially at the more entry level. I think if you get into the 20 years plus, probably less so. I don't use a machine to look at resumes. I look at them all myself, and I work at the executive level. And then I do see, especially for 20 years and younger, perhaps, more of a personal website. So you can leave your website, you leave your resume pretty straight and narrow, and then your personal website can allow for a little bit more creativity. Are there any, I'm looking at the chat, are there any trends that you are seeing that you have questions about or would want to share with the rest of the audience? Of the people who are attending, we had a lot who are in the 20 and under years of experience.
Doesn't look like we're getting much questions right now, so.
Okay, we'll move on. So your resume is part of the brand of you. Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, those all contribute to the brand of you. I put Moo down at the bottom. Moo is a publisher, they business cards, and I just like their aesthetic. So every time you leave a digital breadcrumb, you're helping build the brand of you. And sometimes that can stink, because sometimes you just want to relax and kick off your shoes and have fun. And that's probably when I would say leave the camera at home, maybe. But give yourself the flexibility. What you put on Facebook can be a lot more casual, a lot more fun than what you put on LinkedIn. I strongly encourage your LinkedIn photograph to be, from here up. It should be just you. Your children, your spouse, your significant others could be on Insta or Facebook. But LinkedIn should be professional. No wife beaters, no Miss America dresses. And your brand obviously is going to change too as you change. So, and it's okay to have an evolution. Any questions about the use of LinkedIn, Facebook, etc.?
We do have a question. How would you recommend cutting down a 2-page resume that's already pretty succinct?
My question would be, why would you feel the need to cut it down? If you only have a year of experience, 2 pages is probably too much. But if you have 10 years of experience, you could stretch it out. That, as I said, 1 page for every 10 years. But in your case, if you're a very prolifically accomplished person, perhaps you need 1 page for every 5 years. And if you want to send it to me, I'll have contact information. I'm happy to take a look at it for you. Any other questions, Heather?
That's all we have right now.
Okay. So here's some resources that you might find interesting. I don't think LinkedIn is going to be a surprise to anyone. That's a terrific, terrific resource. For those of you who are interested in nonprofit, the Bridgespan Group, which is my former employer, is terrific. They have amazing resources, not just job postings, which Indeed has, of course, but also tools to either break into or be more successful within the social sector. Glassdoor, you probably all know, is a great place to get feedback on employers. And then if you are retirement plus age, the Second Act Careers could be a terrific resource, as would Balance Careers. So we mentioned earlier that I've got a career transition boot camp, which is 6 to 8 weeks, helping people transition from one career to another or forward service. Also do executive search, and would be happy to talk to any of you who feel like they could use help in either of those arenas, or happy to look at the person who had the 2-page resume as well. We have a few minutes left. Yeah.
Yeah, we have one more question.
I'd love to hear it.
Will stating I have 30 years experience date me in a way that makes me sound old and inflexible? Would it be better to say over 15 years experience?
I wouldn't cut it in half. You could say, 25 plus. 15 plus, when you actually have 30, I think is too big of a delta. And it depends, people are living longer, and if you're between the ages of 40 and 60, you're protected class once you're hired. But I would either do 20 or 25 plus. I would not do 15 plus. Isn't it funny how fast those years go too? I remember being the youngest in the room. Not anymore.
No more questions at this time.
Okay. Well, we're just at the 30-minute mark, so I think that worked okay.
Well, great. Thank you so much, Cydnee, for this fantastic presentation. On behalf of the Office of Alumni and Constituent Engagement, I want to thank all of our participants who spent their lunch with us today. Be on the lookout for more webinars and events on professional development and hot topics. And thanks again, and have a great rest of your day.
Take care.